You're listening to Graphic Novel Explorers Club podcast, an audiobook club.
Thanks for checking out today's episode of Graphic Novel Explorers Club. I'm one of your hosts, Dennis, joined as usual by
Senor Flores
and
Francis Preziosi.
Today we're discussing The Legend of Luther Strode by Justin Jordan. We hope you already read today's title because all three of us have read the book and will be discussing it. So beware, spoilers ahead. We'd love for you to share your opinion and thoughts on our social media. Twitter is @GNExplorersClub. We're also found on Facebook, and you can email us at gnexplorersclub@gmail.com. Graphic Novel Explorers Club is available on iTunes, Stitcher, and wherever podcasts are available.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of Graphic Novel Explorers Club. I'm one of your hosts, Johnny Flores. I'm joined by
Francis Preziosi
and
Dennis Supachana.
This is season 2
woo, woo.
of our podcast. And we're not kicking it off. We kicked it off with Batman by
Gaslight,
Gaslighting.
yeah.
Batman by Gaslighting versus the social justice
Yeah,
warriors.
the gas lampers. Or is it gaslighting?
By Gaslight, dude.
No, what's
Gotham by Gaslight.
Yeah, I know, but what's gaslighting?
Oh, that's when you're like triggering someone. Like you're trying to...
Oh, that's like when you make someone think they're crazy and they're not.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, that's our podcast. So we're starting it off with Volume 2 of the Luther Strode series. This one is titled The Legend of Luther Strode. It is written by Justin Jordan, art by Trad Moore, colors by Felipe Sobriero, and lettering by Phonographics. I was like, this guy's weird. It's by a company, not an individual.
Oh. Because
I was looking at the name, I was like, Phonographics? What the shit? And the book design's by Drew Gill. So the first volume was titled The Strange Talent of Luther Strode. This one is The Legend of Luther Strode,
which we covered in season 1.
Yes.
Not so nicely.
Yeah, we were quite critical of the book.
The author's credit, yeah.
Yeah, Justin Jordan rebutted.
Graciously.
Yes.
Like so polite and nice
Unlike
several
us.
times.
Unlike the three of us.
Right. Basically.
Well, this book makes that previous one look good.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
Oh man, right off the back. So this is published by Image, and I was just reading this yesterday at Jim Boy's Tacos.
Thanks for that.
About I wasn't reading it in the bathroom. I was just at Jim Boy's Tacos on my phone reading about Image Comics, and I didn't know that they allow the creative talent to own their products.
Yes,
they own.
That's a big
they
deal.
have creative control. They have creative control and the rights to all of their own creations. Whereas, like if you work for DC or Marvel, anything you come up with is owned by DC or Marvel.
Like the Watchmen.
Yeah, and you own. You get like a
$1.
Yeah, you get a small percentage bonus, but it's not much. It's not like if you own Robert Kirkman's fucking filthy rich because he owns the rights to The Walking Dead.
Right.
So.
I will say before we get started, because I just need to preface this, I kind of now have a slight girl crush on this author because I think he tries so hard. And I have, even if I don't like your work, and I'm not saying that in this case, but for an artist to put themselves out there and to do it and to be successful, I mean, he's a writer for a lot of these books in the foreword. He does a lot of other series as well. And so I admire anybody who can put themselves out there and who can make a living out of being creative because it's challenging. And to own your stuff, like that's really...
Yeah, he did a lot of the New 52 books. I think he did Green Lantern.
Right.
And some of the like B-level
Once again,
superheroes.
You can have a person who is amazingly talented and still not like their work. Brian Michael Bendis is the key example that we like to point to.
Everyone has their first pancake.
Right. Okay, first off,
that should be a shirt.
Yeah.
Everyone has.
Let me see. My first pancake usually is the best one, and then subsequently,
What?
Yeah, no. Usually it's not burnt, and then The other ones, sometimes like the last ones are usually the worst ones. I don't know why.
What the hell?
Maybe
is
I'm just
wrong
cooking
with you,
pancakes
dude?
wrong.
Yeah. Note to self: never go to Dennis's house for pancakes.
Notice your
eggs.
pancakes, I don't offer to make them for you. There's a reason.
Well, and yours are just Lego, my Eggos, so I don't know why you're messing them up so badly. Okay, back on track here. So this is the foreword that Mr. Justin Jordan wrote. The first volume of the series, The Strange Talent of Luther Strode, was about a reasonably normal kid, Luther, getting a book that unleashed superhuman powers in him. It did not go well for Luther. You don't have to read that book to read this one. I wish we had known that. But it's probably helpful to understand that where he and Petra come from. I can't read this morning.
I was going to say, he didn't write this.
Yeah.
He wrote part of it.
Luther wanted a lot, maybe all teenage boys want. He wanted to be buffed and awesome. He wanted to kick some ass and get the girl. He wanted to keep the people in his life safe. And he got most of that. I don't know what
So this is why I started getting a slight girl crush on this author, because I think in his pubescent mind, when he was like a kid,
Justin Jordan.
Yeah, and I'm totally speculating. I've never met him. I don't know him. I didn't Google him. He was probably not one of the popular kids, and he might be. I don't know, but like people are like, oh, what's it like to be like the jock player or the stud? And so he created this universe where, like, okay, you are the star, you're the stud, you're powerful, but it's not a happy life. There's a lot of consequences that come with that. And I think there's a vulnerability there. I'm totally self-imposing this. But then I did, and the idea of this book, I did like it. Like, what happens? Like, what is the effect? I just don't think the book lines up with the foreword once again. I know you didn't finish the foreword. I apologize. I'll let you go back.
I'm done reading it.
Yeah. But it's basically like, so what happens to, like, so in the first series, lots of spoilers here, this guy got this book and he like trained himself to be the superhero, but he
unknowingly.
Unknowingly. But he lost all of his friends and family. Basically, they all died. And so now there's only one person that still really kind of has his back. And so the story starts
5 years later.
Yeah.
So in the previous volume, if you haven't read it, as to kind of build on what Francis was saying, is he gets the book, gets superpowers. In doing so, he finds out that there's like this secret society of other people that are incredibly gifted with strength, speed, reflexes. And
there's a name for them too. I can't remember the name right now.
Oh, the organization? Yeah, I don't remember either.
They have like a certain title.
And in that process, his mom was killed. He killed his mom actually on accident, and his best friend died trying to defend Luther's mom, and he kind of lost his humanity there too.
Pretty much,
because he
kind of hulked out.
Yeah, he went into rage mode and killed a bunch of people. So this story, volume 2, kicks off with like some two dudes talking about prostitution and basically they're talking about trading women back and forth. Luther Strode shows up. He's kind of a shadowy figure. He's much like the title. He's a legend amongst criminals, and he winds up murdering both of these guys.
Yeah, he's very much just like he kills bad people. Like that's what he does. Like at night he goes and finds the bad people and he kills them to try to bring justice.
It's kind of the Batman plot, but more brutal. But there isn't a lot of dialogue. So there's no inner monologue. There's no reasoning. It's just basically he's killing these people, and it's apparent that he's kind of keeping a trophy of each one by keeping their driver's licenses on a wall, which is very
like Fight Club.
Yeah. And so it's a little psychotic.
Yeah.
Well, back to your point too. I made banana bread before I read this, and I put the banana bread in the oven, and I was like, oh my God, this book is going to take me hours because it's thick. I finished this book before the bread was done baking.
Yeah.
So like there isn't a lot of dialogue. There's not a lot of story, but there is, I mean, through the art.
There's like basically two big scenes, or it's like two places where it takes places at a bad guy hideout, and then that's actually a trap to catch Luther, and then a second bad guy hideout. That's
right.
it. I mean, that's kind of, and then it ends at a mall, and it's kind of, it's not a lot of set pieces in the story. So then we get to two guys, an older man and a younger man, in a cafe, and they're talking about the younger man. I don't know what's his name.
I forget,
Jimmy.
but he basically has taken over his dad's criminal business. Now, I just want to make sure we've never.
No, these characters have not been introduced before.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I forgot.
Yeah.
Like maybe Luther had killed his dad in the previous one, because I know he took care of a big gang.
Yeah.
In the previous one. So yeah, so basically they're talking about this legend and how he's disrupting business and killing their guys. Right?
Didn't his dad have the same superpower, but he like beat his mom, so his mom like left and hid because she didn't know he had the superpower?
That's Luther.
Yeah. So
This guy, yeah.
No, Jimmy doesn't have. Jimmy's the
power.
Right, no, that's what I mean. Luther, yeah, that's
Right,
that's
so-
the backstory on him and his dad.
the Luther thing was
No,
kind
we're
of-
talking about Jimmy and the.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. So Luther and his dad, basically, yeah, Luther's dad was abusive. He did have the same gifts as Luther did, but remember, it seemed like,
His were like toned down.
Yeah.
or he didn't want to use them. Like he was
Yeah.
abusive, but he actually kind of resigned himself. The librarian had said, "What a waste," because he was basically sitting on a couch,
Yeah.
not doing anything.
The librarian was the antagonist from the first
from the
volume.
main organization.
Yeah, and his dad, if I remember correctly, we almost at the beginning of the story, it seems like he's just an abusive prick. The family's hiding out
Yeah.
from him. He gets out of jail, and then you realize like, oh, he realized that these powers were making him beat up his family.
Right.
So he went and hid basically and refused to interact with society. And you're almost like sympathetic to the guy. It was like almost like someone who has an addiction,
Mhm.
and they realize the addiction's breaking up their family, so they is hurting people. So they decide to, I'm just gonna abstain from having any contact with anyone.
Yeah, I would agree with that because it was apparent that he still had his bulk, so he could probably kill all sorts of people, but he chose not to.
Yeah.
But regardless, this is about a new crime organization.
Yeah, so this is regular human being crime organization run by a young man named Jimmy, and then his
Number
major
two.
domo is Mr. Duval. I think that's probably because he's Mr. Duval's bald headed, and I think that's paying homage to Robert Duvall, and he was the consigliere for
Godfather.
The Godfather,
Right.
And Tom.
Right.
Tom was the character's name. So I'm curious if that's like his, because in the first volume there was a ton of pop culture references to different movies, comic books.
I guarantee it. Like even the two henchmen, if you notice, one of them was Pinkman, as in the Breaking Bad character.
Oh, Jesse
Yeah,
Pinkman.
yeah.
Oh.
I don't notice these things because I was like, let me just get through this
Because you
as quickly as possible.
because you spent most of your life going on dates, meeting people, socially interacting,
Making banana bread.
building relationships with people, and Dennis and I just hid in our houses and played video games and talked to each other through the PlayStation.
You guys still do that.
I sold my PlayStation.
Yeah, Johnny actually basically severed that tie. Thanks a lot, buddy.
I decided to grow up just a tiny bit. So they're in a cafe. They're discussing Jimmy taking over the organization. Mr. Duvall kind of keeps calling him Jimmy, and he gets upset about that. He's like, "Did you call my dad Jimmy, or did you call him Mr. Whatever?" And he's like, "Oh, sorry, Mr.
Whatever.
And, yeah, Mr. Whatever." So then these two dudes come in.
Tough guys.
Tough guys. They beat up some of their.
Oh, because the guy's like, the restaurant's closed, and he just like punches him out.
Right.
Like, you don't tell me it's closed.
Punches somebody so hard he like flies across the room,
Mhm.
which is I would love to be able to do that. So then it's revealed that these two are hired to catch Luther.
Mhm.
They want to stop Luther. So then you go to the hideout, and there's bad guys. I don't know.
Basically, it's they're trafficking women.
Yeah.
And it's a bait for Luthor. I don't know how he finds out. He's not like Batman where he actually investigates anything. So I'm not sure
Yeah.
exactly how he finds out where these bad guys are.
Craigslist.
Yeah.
Well, towards the end of the book too, though, I don't want to get too ahead of it, but they do say like they can smell blood. They can. So
True.
I was thinking maybe he has like these superpowers where he can like sense the fear or smell the smell. I don't know what senses he's using, but yeah, or if it's just innate. Like, yeah.
Good point. I forgot about his
Oh,
powers.
no. So, yeah, and they were setting it up because they wanted to catch Luther on video to prove that he was real. So that was part of the setup too.
I didn't get that.
It's not the Mr. Duvall didn't know that was the case, but it was actually set up by another person. I forgot his name, but he's called the Binder.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The librarian, the Binder.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll have the author in the next chapter. The publisher. I don't know.
The publisher. The back rubber.
The printer. I don't know. But anyway, so this guy had set it up. I didn't understand the logic. I'm actually with Mr. Duvall on this, but basically they sacrificed their henchmen.
A bunch of them, so they could capture this guy on tape killing the henchmen, so they could prove, one, he's no longer a myth, kind of like John Wick, where he's no longer a myth, he's actually real. Yeah.
You see him, he was the Baba Goosh or whatever. And then, I guess this allows them to figure out how to capture him. I don't know. I didn't understand the logic. It didn't make a lot of sense. Like, Mr. Duvall actually made more sense to me. Like, well, why didn't we just try to actually capture him instead of just sacrificing
a bunch of our employees?
Yeah, and then the Binder guy espouses some crap that I didn't.
Yeah, they talk some more about everyone's like presenting their argument, and then they're like, well, wait, we've got someone who knows him very well and can catch him, and it turned out to be Petra, and Petra's saying, I can help catch him.
Okay, we need to pause here because this really bothered me. Like, this really bothered me last night. I think it's a different artist than whoever did the original, and Petra is much more sexified in this version, and so in the first book she hadn't had like this what's that movie? The Hackers, like Angelina Jolie type look.
Hackers.
Yeah, like she was very kind of like 90s, kind of like punk, but not punk, like alternative, very cute, not fitting the
Pixie.
cheerleader mold.
Yeah,
and I really liked her. And here she's got like the tiny tight abs and like the skin tight clothes. And I was like, you guys didn't need to do that. Like, I get it's 5 years later. Also, these people, all the characters now, including Luther Strode, are much more cartoonish to me. Or in the first book, they looked like actual people. Like, it wasn't so. So I noticed right away, just the artwork here seemed kind of off, and I was disappointed that they did what they did to Petra. Like, they didn't need to. She's such a strong female. Like, don't stop.
You
Stop
need to
limiting
overly
women.
sexualizing
Yeah,
her.
like she's still strong. Like, and you don't need to to do that to people to be interested. So shame on you, artists.
It is the same artist. Tradmore did the first one.
What? It's the same?
I know, it felt more angular this time.
Yeah.
But they were probably trying to show that they're more mature. They're not teenagers anymore.
Well, and I'm wondering, maybe the first book did so bad that they tried to like make this one more like other superhero comics, and that's why they changed the artwork. I don't know. But I'm just saying I was disappointed.
Well, Luther, I've read the third volume, and it almost seems like it's their extremism is physically represented, because in the third volume, skipping way ahead, he is like grotesquely muscular. He's not even human anymore.
So maybe it's like a deliberate.
So it might be like a
sense.
Design thing where she's more extreme, because now she's trying to catch Luther for the bad guys, and.
Well, I get it. It's 5 years later, too, so people grow and develop. Yeah. But I was like, our clothes don't need to get smaller.
Maybe she only had the clothes from 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But she's
sorry,
grown.
that's my rant for the day.
Yeah, it seems like now she's almost like Linda Hamilton's character from Terminator 2, where it's like she doesn't really have any day job skills. Like, she's just an assassin now. She's just a mercenary for hire.
Well,
I guess.
And then, unfortunately, this comes off of us reading Preacher as well. So this kind of rings like a big trope to me, where it's just this girl who cares about the main character, but she's also a crazy, deadly assassin kind of thing. So
So you bring up another good point. I'm sorry when you're off topic.
No,
I can
it's fine.
save it. Like, because we came off from Preacher, when we first read Luther Strode last season, the imagery was very disgusting to me and very disturbing, and I had a hard time with it. This time I read this, and there's some really grotesque scenes. Didn't even faze me. And I'm like, oh, this is how people become like
desensitized.
Yeah, because I've just seen it now so much. And with Preacher, that was more disturbing to me than so the blood and guts didn't really impact me as much, and I wonder if that's why they have to try. And we'll get there. We'll get to the fight scene, and I'll talk about that later.
So honestly, I felt like there was a lot less blood and guts in this one, and I was actually kind of disappointed. A lot of the elements I liked in the first one, suddenly I missed in the second one.
Yeah.
I don't know. The ending of this is pretty fucking gory.
Yeah. Well, and I think too. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I think too, because there was more of a story in the first one,
Right.
and there's more character development. That when you saw the people that you started caring about and how gory it was, that really impacted you. But here, you don't care about anybody, so it's
Well,
like,
you
oh,
don't
it's
care
just more
about the
blood
bad
and
guy
guts.
getting killed.
There's no
Yeah.
innocent character in this, really.
Yeah.
Luther's best friend and his mom were both innocent characters, and the best friend sacrificed himself, knowing he had no chance of defeating that guy, stood up and tried to make a difference. And this one, it's just everybody's murdering everyone in there.
And there's a lot less meaningful dialogue. Luther has a lot less. I don't know. I feel like I know him even less now. He's just this kind of this Hulk.
Yeah. The personification of death more than anything. So getting back on track here. So Petra breaks into his lair and is somewhat concerned for him. She's like, what's happening to you? You just seem to be...
Well, it's really confusing at this point for me as a reader. So is she really trying to hunt him down because she's pissed off at him? Last we saw her, he had beat up all those bad guys in a bloody fashion and just basically took off, right?
Yeah.
To save his mom. So we're not sure of her reasoning. She kind of explains it, but I'm not sure if she's being duplicitous.
Yeah, he asks, why are you here? Why are you here, Petra? Because she hits him.
Right.
And he's almost it's kind of disturbing because he goes, if you were anybody else, I'd kill you for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, they're not. That's not the appropriate
Yeah.
response. You see where he has lost his humanity,
Right.
and she yells at him, "Why am I here? Why am I fucking here? I'm here because you weren't, because you left. After what I saw, after what you did, you can't." And he goes, "That's worth killing me for." And she says, "I didn't come here to kill you. I came here to save you."
And it turns out she's lured the other bad guys
Yeah.
to this area, which I don't know how she didn't think this would happen. And yeah, I don't know. Their reunion should be meaningful, right? It should have some sort of impact. It's been 5 years. It fell flat out to me. It just, his responses are so monotone.
Yeah.
And even her reasoning doesn't seem to, I would think she would be more emotional or, explain things. I don't know. It just, the fact that he traumatized her, now she's hunting him down.
Or if she went to him, if you knew where he was at, why didn't you just go over there? Why did you have to get the mob involved?
The best question ever. If you wanted to protect him, why did you usually you would maybe work for the mob and then send them somewhere else.
Yeah.
Pretend he's over there and then really, quote unquote, go
Or
to where he's at.
Run him into a scenario where they're, basically trapped, fish in a barrel, and
Right.
then he gets them.
Right. She sets them up, but
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like she did any of that. She got their help for what purpose?
And this is another thing I didn't like about her characters. You don't understand the reasoning at all.
Mm-hmm.
Or in the first book, you kind of got it. You had more. And I think he says in the forward, you don't have to read the first book. You do, because you don't care. This is such a
Right.
Yeah, you would have no. Well, you would certainly be lost as well, who the fuck was he? Like you were saying, he doesn't. Luther barely speaks in this, so you would, if you didn't know that he was a kid that got these abilities, you'd be like, well, what the fuck's going on? Anyways, the bad guys come in. Luther starts killing all of them by just cutting him in half with his hand. At the same time, Petra's running around shooting people. They wind up saving each other a couple different times, and then the binder is sitting across. They're in an old rundown apartment complex that's a couple
That's
stories
where
tall.
all like superheroes live. They never
Yeah,
just have like a regular
pretty much.
house.
Yeah. Or, well, good. We talked about this in the first one. They have docks in this town. They have old abandoned buildings.
Well, once again, it speaks to what you said earlier. It's like, well, how does he have this apartment without paying rent? Because he obviously has no day job, unless he's working at Starbucks during the day.
with his white mask on.
Right.
Here's your coffee.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Justin,
Calm
that's your
down.
next book. Luther Strode, no longer a superhero. Like he's like 50, working
Barista.
like has no life skills. How does he
Yeah,
manage?
yeah.
That's the next bad guy, the barista.
He grinds the beans with his bare hands
Oh, that
on
would be
his
awesome.
forehead.
I like it.
Oh, man, that's awesome. So then...
So the binder's basically trying to get Luthor. Clearly, he's using some sort of
he's got a sniper
drug
rifle,
darts.
with some sort of poison that'll knock him out. And then everybody winds up shooting at everyone. Luther's killing folks. Here's the thing, too, that doesn't make sense in the book is sometimes Luther and these guys with these super abilities can be shot and it doesn't do anything to them. And then other times they can be shot and killed. Like, I don't understand.
That's a really good point, too. I'll skip a little bit ahead. So the binder explains to Luther why they went in hiding, why Kane basically wrapped himself up and everything. And one of the things was that man was creating technology, and the technology was killing them because it was outpacing their abilities. And it showed, the picture specifically showed a guy being shot to death, I assume with the abilities. So you're right. It seemed to imply, in some cases, guns can really hurt us. In other cases, guns don't do shit.
It'll pierce their flesh, but it doesn't kill them.
Well,
Then
no.
they-
So Luther. Oh, sorry.
You go ahead.
So to skip ahead too, Luther did say in one of the fight scenes, he's like, "I have trained my muscles to reject bullets."
Mm-hmm.
So he like built up this resistance, and some of the others probably hadn't.
And that's a
Like-
good point, is
okay.
that
Yeah,
basically Luther's at a different level compared to the others.
Right.
He's a triple black belt.
And that's the reason why everybody wants him, because
Right.
he is so powerful.
He's achieved a level of zen that none of them have.
And I don't know if I'm getting ahead of you, Johnny. Oh no, I think I am. So I'm gonna wait.
Okay.
Okay.
Are you sure you want to
Well,
wait?
so the reason the binder. Do you want to? Are you getting to why the binder wants him?
Well, I'm about to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna wait.
Okay. So
I won't mansplain.
female splain. So then Luther's going around killing everybody, chopping everybody up, and then Petra, the binder, gets the drop on Petra, and tells Luther, "You got to come with me." And then Luther flings blood into the
Like a whip.
Yeah.
Like a crazy whip into the guy's eyes.
yeah.
And at this point, you assume the binder is just a biker hired gun.
Yeah, and they're punching, and their two fists connect.
Right.
Binder and Luther's fists connect, and it turns out the binder's
So one of them.
one of the.
Rainbows and unicorns come out. Oh, that's a love story.
Yeah. They start making out. Wait a minute. Sorry, that was my fanfic that I drew.
So then the binder beats the shit out of
Luther.
and then he binder flings blades into Luther that apparently have electricity stored in them.
I wasn't super clear if it was one of those kung fu things where he happened to hit certain nerve points.
Oh,
And so
I see.
It showed electricity, but it was like short-circuiting his body. Because the whole thing is that you're supposed to be in tune with your body and your nerves and everything like that.
Like
Oh,
when,
see, I didn't get that either.
like in the
That
Japanese
sounds
movies
better.
where you can like ta 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 ta, and you hit
Well,
somebody in a
the
couple
5
different spots in it.
Well, the Kill Bill thing, the
Yeah.
5-point.
The
death.
5-finger death.
Yeah, exactly.
Why do I feel like you and Johnny like were in his backyard after watching that movie, trying to like actually make that happen?
No, you would not do that to
Yeah.
your friend.
God, Francis. That is really dangerous.
Yeah. So then the binder goes to inject him with something, and there's a lot of blood being used in this as like last minute weapon.
Well, and it kind of calls back to the first volume where I think Kane used his tooth
Oh, to spit
and
kill that guy.
kill that guy. So it's showing how in control of their body they are. They not only can they use their fists and punches,
They can
but
use their fluids.
fluids as weapons.
So yeah, he spits a tooth through the.
I think it's blood. I think you're right. It's just blood.
There's a tooth
there's
connected
also
to it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then so they continue fighting, and then Mr. Duvall shows up. He wants to try and kill them. It's just a lot of.
Well, so the reason he's after Luther, the reason they want him is because. Did you already say that?
No.
Is because Luther is calling way too much attention to himself. Yeah. This league has kept a really low profile. They, you don't even know Mr. Duvall is one of him until the fight, and he's like.
Just a quick correction. I don't want to be mansplaining. Okay. Mr. Duvall is just part of the human gang.
Oh, that's right. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
The binder.
The binder. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So they keep a very low profile, and he's like, and this comes out later too. Like he wants to help him and teach him some more stuff, but he's like, because even though he's so powerful, there's a lot of things he still doesn't know, and because he doesn't have that source, he's not going to know it. But they're like, basically, like you're causing so much attention, you're going to ruin our species.
Yeah.
So.
Right. And so it shows a little bit of the binder going after another individual who he captures, because some people don't want to be bound up like Cain, and he's sent out to basically retrieve them. He's like a bounty hunter.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's Dog the bounty hunter of the series. So then Petra gets captured a second time. They go back to the mansion that Jimmy lives at, and it turns out they're going to use Jack the Ripper, who was...
Oh, is that who that was?
Yeah.
Oh, you didn't know that? Because his name's Jack.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
okay. Sorry. I should have got that.
Well, and then if you looked at the picture, it shows that they were
did.
dressed in like late 1800s
Yeah, he's
outfits.
got like a long...
I thought he was just super weak from being contained. Like, I didn't get Jack the Ripper.
Oh, no, yeah, it's Jack the Ripper.
Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper.
Well, that's stupid.
Mr. Duvall was left behind, but he helps
He tells Luther where to go.
because he knows that the binder isn't.
Well, and he knows that he thinks Jimmy's a fuck up too.
Right.
And
right.
So then they show up, and Jimmy's been gutted by Jack the Ripper, which was pretty disgusting.
Yeah, I don't understand why they did that. Like, there was no sign of they had to betray him. I mean, I don't know. It just seemed too...
Well, I think the binder is just... He doesn't really give a shit about
he's
this
just
gang.
He's just using them. But I felt like there wasn't enough forewarning that they were going to do that to Jimmy, or whatever his name is.
Yeah, I feel like at this part now, it just becomes very glorified violence, and there's no rhyme or reason. Like
Right.
It's just like, okay, for the next 30 pages, that's all. It's just these two guys just like throwing blades at each other
And talking.
Yeah.
It's very much Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah.
Just a lot of like
Yeah.
Street Fighter. Like, I'm going to do my super move. No, wait, let me do my super
Yeah.
move. Wait, let me do my super counter.
So something that was interesting in some of these pages, there's one interesting thing. Instead of reading like left page, right page, some of the pages actually go all the way across both pages.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And you can follow along because it's so simplistic.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought it was an interesting take on some of the artwork and to get, instead of just the...
I did think it was kind of cool when they would show how a fight would go through the room. It was almost like Family Circus when
Right.
Billy goes through the town and you could follow the dots. It was
Follow the razor blades
Yeah.
and the blood. Yeah.
follow the yellow punch lines. I thought that was pretty interesting. Yeah, so Jack the Ripper and the binder are both trying to take down Luther, and then at some point the binder realizes Jack the Ripper is gonna
Betray
escape.
him. Right.
So they're trying to get out, and then it's kind of like a three-way battle, and then Petra is being chased by Jack the Ripper, and
The binder fights Mr. Duvall.
yeah,
And then Mr. Duvall ends up igniting some propane tanks, shooting some propane tanks, blowing himself up, and the binder in the process.
binder.
Well, he doesn't really take out the binder. He injures them seriously.
Well, you think he's dead.
Yeah.
It turns out he's not.
Yeah.
Oh, and at some point, Jack the Ripper had thrown knives into the binder's eyes
Mhm.
and
blinding him,
but he can still hear, smell, and feel.
Use all his super senses.
Yeah, and he's still just as effective a fighter.
Are the listeners as bored as I am? Because this is what it was like for me last night. But
Reading
I had
this.
wine. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get our conclusion. So
And then it gets to like, they end up at the mall
Well, so the Binder comes out of the fire. Jack the Ripper cuts his head off, kills him.
A la Highlander.
Yeah, and then they wind up going to a mall. And
Which is this reminded me of the 80s movie. I forget the name, but it's like kind of like Walking Dead, but not. It's like the town's attacked by zombies, and these like 4 teenagers.
Night of the Comet?
Is that it?
Yeah.
Where they end up at the mall, and like they just like hang out at the mall all for throughout their whole
Night of the
movie.
Comet.
I think that's Night of the Comet, where a comet passes over and it turns...
People.
No. They're not zombies. Some people are, and then a lot of people disappear.
Right.
That was Night of the Comet.
I don't think it's
believe.
that. I think it's something else. But it could be, but it's like definitely like a B or C movie. But I was like, oh, now we're at the mall. Okay.
So so they figure out Jack the Ripper's at the mall. He got there ahead of them, and they show up and it's a pretty gruesome drawing of like dead bodies everywhere inside this mall. It's like a 3-story mall in the fountains.
Not everyone's dead though. Some people have hidden.
But people are designed, like they're laid out in a design fashion, and there's little babies at the top of the fountains that have been killed.
And then but here's the thing: they're not dead. He left them alive to
that's true.
suffer. Like they think they're
Right.
dead, but they realize, wait. So Luther starts going around killing them,
Right.
like suffocating them. And Petra's like, "Why are you doing that?" He's like, "I can't help them, and I don't want them to suffer."
Yeah.
I'm gonna say something. I've been saying a lot. So there's a scene where like Petra, like you see, there's still people like hiding in the mall. What year was this written? Do you know?
2011, I think.
Yeah.
2012.
So, we're recording now, and recently there was a shooting in Las Vegas.
We're recording this in October
yeah.
of 2017.
We won't play it till later, but this scene actually kind of made me like, oh, because this is like where the blood and guts come into play. Like that actually can happen and has happened.
Right.
And I was just like, that scene right there where you see like it's very dark and you see some kids kind of hiding behind a counter and you see all these dead bodies. That just really hit me, and I think just because of what's happened recently, and unfortunately that's the world right now. But I was just like, I don't know. It's like for some reason, out of everything in this book, that's the one thing where I was like, I just felt sick to my stomach.
It's pretty gory.
Well,
Yeah.
The thing that like really grossed me out was the babies at the top of the fountain. I was just
Right.
all fucking A.
Well, and you bring up a good point, Francis. Basically, if we had looked at it before those events, it would just been over the top gore, like, oh, that would never happen. But some of that resonates now as a reality. So yeah, I can see what you're saying.
Way to kill the mood, Francis. No, I'm just
Sorry.
kidding.
Anyway, so Jack and
They continue to fight. Luther
Yeah.
and Jack are fighting, and then Petra, like you were saying, Francis is. Everyone's scared shitless, so they won't move. So she like starts firing her gun and says, "Get the fuck out of here!" And everyone starts running out, and Jack the Ripper remorsefully sees people fleeing and says like, "Oh, we could have had so much fun."
yeah, he's kind of Joker-like.
Yeah. And then Petra gets a chainsaw and starts chainsawing the shit out of
yeah,
Jack the Ripper.
She really saved the day, right?
well, she did, but she's like, I have this idea, and so she goes to get the chainsaw, but it's like, how come that kills him?
Well,
That's where I get
It's
confused.
almost like
how
Wolverine.
come?
It's almost like Wolverine-ish, where
Well, there was a Wolverine scene here
where
we
if
didn't
you-
talk about, where he did bring out the blades in his
yeah,
hand.
he did have like little.
the binder.
Yeah.
That's the ones he threw
Yeah.
into.
But you didn't say like it was like the Wolverine thing, like it came out of his hand.
It didn't
No,
come out of his
Like
he
hand.
was
claws.
holding it. Those were like throwing knives that he threw.
Well, it looked like
It
Wolverine.
did.
Yeah.
It did.
And the scene where she gets the chainsaw is another homage to Pulp Fiction because she keeps going from one weapon to another,
Right.
And then
Yeah.
finally sees the chainsaw.
So how did that kill him?
Well,
Well,
I think because they
Severed.
they cut him up.
Right. So remember what ended up killing the librarian was his head getting actually ripped off.
Same with the binder.
So
Oh, because you don't have your senses then.
right.
Like,
So
they're disconnected.
physically they can be damaged. It takes time for them to recover. In some cases they're not immune to damage. But then she basically went chainsaw all the way up the middle and then
Took his head off.
took his head off.
Okay.
I think the brain is the susceptible portion.
So like they're kind of zombie-ish. Yeah, because the binder he ripped his spine and skull, or the librarian. So they step outside of the mall and there's police. everywhere.
Oh, we need to back up a little bit. Sorry.
Back that ass up.
The binder keeps telling Luther that Petra is his weakness because he cares about somebody and he shouldn't care.
Oh, good point.
And he does say, like, throughout the book, when he's like, they're about to hurt they take Petra, and he's like, please don't hurt her. I love her. And so now you can go on to because that plays a role.
So then you think the series ends, and then we get to the area where Kane is bound. And he's getting a report from a woman dressed in white with a little mole on her left cheek. And she's like, the boy killed them. Both of them, Jack, I could do without, but the binder. And then Kane says he should have been better. And then she says, he's coming, the boy, Strode, he's coming for you. You know that, don't you? And then he says yes with a smile and apparently blows smoke out of his mouth. I don't know.
Who knows?
Wait, so did you get to the point where Luther tells Petra, I love you?
You just did.
No. I said he tells the bad guys that he loves Petra. Then he goes to tell Petra that he loves her, but she kind of stops him and says something else. Like, but you kind of get the point, like in the kiss,
okay.
they know.
I missed
so
that.
there's a whole love story buried in all this blood and gore. Over.
Like I said, it's unfortunate we read it right after Preacher because some of it echoed to me of Jesse and Tulip, and Jesse always wanted to protect Tulip, and Tulip, showing that she can take care of herself. And some of it seemed exactly like Tulip, where she's getting a big machine gun and shooting on the bad guys. So,
although I don't know, I feel Luther's a little bit more straight up with Petra than Jesse is with Tulip.
Absolutely,
he at least allows her to go into to fights with him.
He's not going to knock her out and then go and
drug her and then be like,
and he tells her, he's like, if you're going to fight, you need to learn how to shoot because she's terrible at shooting.
Right.
I agree with you, though. And this...
Who, with Dennis?
Yes, sorry. He's like, let's clarify. This is what got me out of comic books. I just...
Gory books?
Well, not gory. Like, when the books start to all run the same. Like, this is... Especially I don't read mainstream comics. I've been more indie for a really long time. Not to sound cool. Just... It's the same story over and over. It's the guy, he becomes strong, the woman is overly sexualized and, bad things happen. And of course they save the world.
Well, I think this goes back to what you were saying at the beginning it's somewhat, or not somewhat, it's the beta male fantasy of, if people just really knew the power that I have inside me, it would change things. And that is manifest in these types of stories where the nobody becomes a somebody. And,
right. And to the author's credit, he actually said that this was an homage and meant to look at some of the tropes of superhero stories. Yeah. I mean, the first volume was very much Peter Parker's story, right? He obtains power accidentally. A loved one gets killed. It spurs him to then become a hero more. But I don't know. There's this thing where what's the difference between just being derivative and being an homage, right? I mean, we've talked a little bit about it before, but, Tarantino, when it comes to Pulp Fiction being basically an homage to 70s flicks, Kill Bill to like Kung Fu flicks and such, why does that work? And you can see it as an homage, but it's not a direct ripoff or derivative, whereas some other works, and I won't necessarily...
Same with Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin ripped off a ton of people, but for whatever reason, people love Led Zeppelin.
Right. And
do they?
Well, they've sold a lot of records.
But yeah, what's that spark that basically gives you that gives the new story something new and interesting, so it doesn't seem derivative? I mean, there's other stories in the comic book world like Irredeemable. I don't know if you ever heard of it, but it's by Mark Waid. It's basically the story of what if Superman had basically said, I don't give a fuck about people, and turned bad. And there's a whole comic series on it. And it's interesting because it takes some of the tropes of Superman and then flips them because now he's a bad guy. It adds a different layer.
Or like The Boys.
The Boys. Mm-hmm. Or even Watchmen, famously. I mean, that's the Justice League. There's Batman. There's, those kind of characters. But what if they decided that humanity needed a push to basically do the right thing? They were sick of basically taking care of low-level criminals. So those things are, they take the elements of what came before and kind of spin it. This one, I don't think successfully spinned it enough to make it its own thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. And there's really no story. Like it's so
Right.
sparse. And I was like, and this is where I was like, well, the first book, he really tried. There was a lot of backstory. There was character development. And here it's just such a one-off. Like, it's just, okay, we're going to start killing people. And I was like,
I felt zero investment for anyone, even the main characters. The first one made me care about Luther, his friend, Petra.
we all
Mom.
loved his friend. Like, we were all
Yeah.
sad when his friend
Yeah.
died. And now we're like, okay.
Well, yeah, like we're saying, there's no.
Heart, soul.
Well, you also need sometimes in these stories you need a every man.
You need
to
Jimmy
be-
the Cricket.
Yeah. You need the person that is the common person that is the end to be like, oh, okay. I would react the same way as that person.
Right.
Yeah.
As everyone's a superhero in this. Even Petra, like she avoids bullets and danger just like a superhuman would.
I really think maybe if Luther had a kitten and the kitten was in danger,
hell
this
outta
would
here.
have been such a better story. And like the kitten could have been running throughout the fire.
Right,
like,
and he
"Go,
saves the
kitten."
kitten.
Actually,
Right.
you know what? That is
Or
a good
she had
idea.
like all 9
Yeah,
lives.
I like it.
And
Well, that's the thing. That's what made John Wick work. You
Yeah.
like John Wick because his puppy died,
see?
and then you were like pissed off, and you're like, yeah, that's good motivation
Yeah.
for you to kill an entire Russian gang.
Yeah.
So I will say props to the author, because guess what? Next season, we'll probably read volume 3, and somehow this guy got me to read 3 books and characters I don't care about, and he got my money. So good job.
I agree with what you said too at the beginning about he is trying. He successfully pulled off getting 3 volumes of his own creative work published, and we read it. I mean, that's
Right.
Yeah, we're still reading it.
it's an accomplishment in and of itself that he got this out there and that people are looking at it. And it does take a certain amount of bravery to put something out there and let people rip it apart like we just did. Like that I definitely commend Justin Jordan on that.
We Luther Strode this book.
Yes, and I do appreciate the art. It's a very unique looking illustration style. So I appreciate it.
I actually wished for more gore. Like that whole fight scene from the beginning of the first one, where he stuffs an arm down
the
someone's
guy's
throat.
throat.
All that stuff was missing from this one. I felt I could have used more of that.
Yeah, there was no pause. There was no like, oh, look at this damage that they created. 'Cause
Yeah.
it was so fast.
Or remorse for the
Yeah.
damage. Like
Right. He's just a
it's-
killing machine at this point.
Yeah, and this one first one he's Spider-Man. This one he's the Punisher. And it's
But even the Punisher, I would argue, I don't know, you can feel his rage. Like this one is almost so cold. Like
Yeah.
I don't understand fully his reasoning. Like the Punisher, I could feel his like this is injustice kind of thing.
Well, I don't know if it's the actual theme of the story or one of the themes that carries through the first volume. The second volume is he seems detached, and that's
Yes.
Petra's concern
Yes.
is like you are detached from what you're doing. You're just killing people, but she seems to be all for it from the middle of the story on.
Right.
Once those two reconnect, from there on out, she's like, "Sweet, kill everyone."
Right.
And she just
Right.
seems to have just as big a heart on for killing people as he does.
Yeah.
almost.
No, I would agree. agree.
So, I don't know. All right, what did you guys think?
Francis?
Although kind of just
Yeah.
summed it up, but
Like, I hated it, but like this is gonna stay with me for years. So I just
do you prefer this volume over volume 1?
no. I
Like volume 1 more?
Yeah, I like
Okay.
volume 1 more, which I never thought I'd say. But like, okay, this is an easy read. Like, you just want to you just want to like tune out and just have some superhero stuff and look at boobs. Then there was no
boobs in
okay,
there.
there's
There
no
are
boobs,
like
but
no boobs.
Yeah.
I stand corrected.
Trust me, we
Let me-
would have written down the pages that
Yeah,
they were on.
I would have notated and folded the corners.
I didn't make the time investment like I did in Preacher, so
Preacher was a long one.
Yeah.
That
No,
was a long.
I didn't like it, but I do like this author now.
Yeah, I definitely have a. I I've got your back, Justin Jordan. I want to see you succeed.
Well, like I said earlier, we don't necessarily like everyone's work. Brian Michael Bendis being a clear example of a
His
guy
early work, those first, Fire, and what was the other one?
Jinx.
Fire and Jinx.
So I mean, everyone's capable of creating greatness and also crap.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I did not like this one at all. It made me appreciate the first one a lot more. I liked the setup of the first one. I felt like we barely got any
Character development or growth,
or even more of the lore. Like I would have liked more than we got of the
more lore.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the
more
backstory.
Backstory. But we got that little tidbit by the binder, why they decided to name themselves after book professions. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I just felt it was lacking. I definitely want to read the third so I can come to conclusion and go, yes, this was complete utter crap, or go, oh, look, it redeemed itself.
Yeah.
But definitely read the first and maybe skip to the third.
Yeah.
This is basically, it was 2 fight scenes. That was it. It was an extended. It really felt like Dragon Ball Z. I don't know if you've ever seen Dragon Ball Z.
All my knowledge of Dragon Ball Z is green guys with spiky hair, and some of them have shaved heads, and then they wind up fighting on the ground, and then somehow they inevitably float into the air and fight up there.
And that's usually about 7 to 8 episodes of that fight. So this felt a lot like where it was just one extended thing, and there was nothing in between. And I felt it was really lacking a lot of soul and depth.
It would have been, because this is almost like a chase.
Yes.
One extended chase. It would have, I never felt that he was in that much danger.
Exactly.
So it would have been, like you're saying with the kitten, it almost would have been better because Petra was so capable of handling herself that if there had been something
like at risk, person,
and like that was constantly, he was having to like stop one thing, go over there, grab that thing, get it out of the dangerous situation, and then try to 2 steps forward, 1 step back, constantly.
And that's a great point. I never felt Petra, of all the people who should be in danger, I never felt she was in danger at all. She was able to basically duck out of the binder's grasp so that Luther could hit him with the blood. And it felt like she could just do whatever she wanted. There was never like, oh, she got shot and she's injured and he's got to make a choice between saving her and fighting
something
him.
else.
Which is what happened in the first volume, where his mom accidentally got killed because his blind rage.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for listening, listeners. Where can people do the social media stuff?
You can find me personally at Words and Waffles on Instagram.
The podcast's official Twitter handle is at GN Explorers Club, and the same thing at GN Explorers Club on Instagram.
And then you can find me, Johnny, on Twitter at Serious Talk Twit. Well, I haven't been tweeting much lately. And then my Instagram, I don't know what it is.
Oh, we have a Facebook page, too. You can check out some of our previous posts. We have a website at GNExplorersClub.com.
We're on iTunes.
And Stitcher.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, thank you guys for listening. You don't have to read the book now because we did it for you.
Yep. Yeah. We summed it up quite succinctly. All right. We'll be back next week. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Graphic Novel Explorers Club. We will be back next week with My Favorite Thing is Monsters by Emil Ferris. Thanks for listening.
Okay, well, it sounds like you're doing it.
That was my Johnny impression. Today we will be discussing Luther Strode.
When did he get a list?
I know.
And when did my jaw extend out so I can't move my mouth?
Now you sound like a Muppet.